Okay, welcome everyone back to our second lesson of our study on the divided kingdom. We are studying the period in history where Israel, the nation of Israel, becomes split into two parts. So someone remind us a little bit of what we talked about in our introductory lesson last week. What do we know about the authorship and the dating of these books of Kings? I've muted everyone just for background noise, so you have to unmute yourself.
Okay. The dating, I think, is about 930 BC when the kingdom.
Yes, when the kingdom split, what happens? Yeah, about like 922 is these are hard when they're ancient, but we have some good data points in there. Is when the kingdom splits. Great point. Yes. So we just right after, we put kind of that trilogy of Saul, David, Solomon right around 1000 BC. And so, just right after that.
Remind me why it split. Is this of Abraham and...
That's what we are going to cover today. So the actual splitting of the kingdom is going to happen in today's reading. So we're about to see that. And so last week we talked about the time leading up to that. We did a little walk through of the timeline of kind of the story of Scripture, the big picture story. And I'll say that if anyone missed that and you would like to see it, it's available on YouTube, and I've had a couple of people ask, like, wait, how do I navigate to that? And so after today's lesson, at the very end, I am going to, everybody, I'll dismiss class and we can go. But if you want to stay, I'm going to do just a quick demonstration of how to get to those videos for anyone who wants to see that. So we saw kind of the story of Scripture. We go from creation, Noah, Abraham, all the way through the Exodus and the people in the wilderness, and all the way up to those glory days of Saul, David, Solomon, and then we get to this kingdom split. So that's where we are now. The books themselves, when were they written? Oh, go ahead. Was that Cynthia?
No, it was me. I was just going to say, weren't we going to talk, the reversal of the wisdom of Solomon, as you called it, when we were getting ready for that?
Yeah, that's one of the themes that we sort of see showing up in today's lesson. So definitely look for that. What else? What else do you remember from last week?
The Deuteronomist is the writer, and it was written while they're in exile. The Israelites are in exile.
Right, because the story goes up through the beginning of exile, and so to finalize the story and get it all written down, it has to be written after that. And that, we talked about how they use sources very close to those times, right?
562, is that right?
What date are you talking about, Dia?
I wrote down 562. Right there.
You broke up a little bit, but that would be, so like 596 would be the fall of Jerusalem. But after that is when, and we don't have an exact date, but after that is when everything would be collected and written. Okay. So I don't think I have anything specific on that year, but right, in this period.
And you gave us two themes of covenant faithfulness and the monarchy.
Yeah, thank you. We'll definitely see those as we go through the whole story, the monarchy and the importance that God puts on the monarchy, right? Like God puts an emphasis on David and his line, and we're going to show that. And then he will continue to have different kings in the kingdom of Israel, right? None of that will be David's line. but they will still continue to have this succession of kings, and we'll see how that works. And then God's covenant faithfulness will continue to show up. Yeah, look for that in today's lesson. So when we left off last week, the Solomon, the end of the passage right before where we're starting now is that Solomon's life has concluded and his son Rehoboam is going to succeed him as king. But Jeroboam, who's Jeroboam?
He was an official or a servant of Solomon's, and he was in charge of the forced labor for the building projects.
Yeah, for the house of Ephraim, right? So he would have worked under, someone who was in charge of forced labor for, it's a section of tribes, right? And he has been told by a prophet that he is going to be king, that God's going to tear away. Remember, they do this classic like prophetic prop scene where the prophet shows up with a new cloak and rips it into pieces and gives 10 pieces to Jeroboam because he is going to take over those 10 tribes. And that's the prophecy that Solomon then finds out about. And so Jeroboam's life is in danger and he flees to Egypt. And that's where we've left it. So we saw that Solomon's behavior over the, towards the end of his reign, what did that do? What was Solomon like toward the end of his reign?
He was not the wise king.
There was that loss. And we never hear about something specific that says his wisdom was taken away, and yet his behavior was the opposite of what we would expect from a godly king, right? When we read the list of things that kings should not do, Solomon did all of them. And when we read the list of things that kings should do, Solomon wasn't doing those, right? His heart was not faithful to God. And so he became more like Pharaoh than like David, with his horses and his chariots and his wealth and his focus on his own power and the enslavement of his own people by putting them to forced labor. And that's where we begin. So someone please read for us 1 Kings 12. I think Pam is going to read.
Pam is going to be our reader today. We've kind of talked about this and thought if we would have a reader or two every session, that it would help us move forward a little bit more quickly. So Pam.
1 through 5, verses 1 through 5.
Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone there to make him king. When Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard this, he was still in Egypt, where he had fled from King Solomon. He returned from Egypt. So they went for Jeroboam, and he and the whole assembly of Israel went to Rehoboam and said to him, "Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you." Rehoboam answered, "Go away for 3 days and then come back to me." So the people went away.
Okay, thank you. So where does Rehoboam go? What's the location here?
It says he went to Shechem, but I don't know.
My footnotes say that's north of Jerusalem.
Yeah, Shechem is in Ephraim. It's in the territory of Ephraim. So whose home territory is this?
You mean the tribe of Ephraim?
Yeah, is this Rehoboam's home base? Is this where he's the strongest? Who in the story do we know that's an Ephraimite?
Jeroboam.
Right, Jeroboam's tribe is Ephraim. Rehoboam, of course, is a Judahite. That's David's tribe, and his home base is Jerusalem, right? It's the capital. It's David's, the city of David, right? Okay, so they go to Shechem. So why does Rehoboam go to Shechem in that verse 1?
To become king? We're going to make him king there?
Israel had assembled there, right? So it's like the people chose the location, right? And they went to Ephraim, and so he came to them, right? Shechem is at a crossroads. It's near the middle of the nation. It's on the northern end of a major north-south route that goes through Shiloh and Bethel and Jerusalem and Bethlehem. You know, so it's a major sort of point of that route and the crossroads that goes the other way as well. It's in a valley with a mountain on each side, and it's been the site of several significant moments in Israel's history. In Genesis 12:6, when Abraham first came to Canaan, he arrives at Shechem, and that's where God appears to him and says, "This is the land I'm giving you and your descendants," and where he first builds an altar to the Lord. Then we see there's the story that's sort of combined between Deuteronomy 27 and Joshua 8, where after the Exodus, this is in Deuteronomy 27, Moses says, when you enter the land, you're going to go to this location. Now, he mentions the mountains, but it's the city, the valley in between them is where Shechem is, right? So this is the location. You're going to go to Shechem. And so in Joshua 8, Joshua does it. He takes the people there and he splits them into two groups, and each group is on the foot of one mountain, right? So they review the covenant there, so that the group on one mountain is shouting the blessings for obeying the covenant, and the group on the other is shouting the consequences for disobeying the covenant. And it's this big covenant review. And then at the end of Joshua, they do another covenant review again at Shechem. So it's an important city with spiritual significance, but you would think, what is the capital of the country of Israel at this point under David and Solomon?
It's Jerusalem.
Yeah, it's Jerusalem, right? So you would think that they would go to the capital, which is Jerusalem. Why not? Why don't they?
I think he felt that Jeroboam was stirring up a little bit of trouble.
Okay, but did Rehoboam choose the location? Who chose the location? Sharon, unmute.
I think you said the people chose.
Yeah.
Well, this is how it reads, right? Israel had assembled there. Israel had gone there. So Rehoboam went, right? Why would Israel choose that location and not Jerusalem?
Well, my notes said that Shechem became the capital for a short time. I mean, were they thinking that that was the capital during that time? And so they went there instead of Jerusalem?
It becomes the capital next because of this, right? So the order is important. So think about, remember, they're going there. Like, is this an innocent question that they are asking Rehoboam? If you think this in terms of power and politics, is this an innocent question that they are asking Rehoboam?
Well, it's not exactly an ultimatum, but they're kind of leaving the possibility open.
But kind of close, right? Yeah, there's a power play going on here, right? We have to see this as like, this is an insurrection. And they have chosen, their power play is choosing this location, right? They don't choose Jerusalem. That's where Rehoboam would be strong, but instead they have him come to their location where they are the strongest, right? So we have to see like the currents going on here, and we'll see that play out at the end when Rehoboam, like as he leaves. Okay, what's the other part of their power play? Verse verse 3.
Jeroboam, they wanted to have Jeroboam be the spokesperson.
Right, they send for him, right? So they bring in Jeroboam where he has fled to Egypt. So it seems like if we read kind of 2 and 3 together, it seems that Jeroboam may have heard about it, and yet they still have to send for him. It may be that Jeroboam is not very eager to put himself forward into the line of fire, maybe in this sort of inflammatory situation where they are going to challenge the reigning king and say, we're not so sure that we're going to follow you, right? So you have to notice like the role that this puts Jeroboam in, right? And if Solomon and now his son Rehoboam are playing the Pharaoh by amassing, as we come into this passage, by amassing their riches and military might and enslaving the people, then what leader would Jeroboam be parallel to? He's coming in saying, you're going to have to let my people go, right? Who's that?
Moses.
Right. So there is this parallel. Okay, I'm going to keep asking you about this echo because it runs very strongly through this whole passage. Moses also the reluctant leader, right? We're going to see this echo of the Pharaoh story show up over and over through this section. Okay, so what is the question that they present to Rehoboam, and what does it mean? What are the kind of the implications of it?
They're rebelling against what Solomon had done, the heavy load that he had put on them.
Yeah, they say, will you lighten our burden? That implies that what Solomon had done was not right, right? So what was the heavy burden that Solomon put on the people?
It was forced labor.
Forced labor, yes.
And
what
taxes.
else?
Taxes.
Yes, the taxation and the forced labor are a heavy burden that Solomon puts on there, and they say, will you lighten our burden? So if they're saying, if you will, we will serve you, then what's implied?
We won't.
No, we won't.
Right? They imply that they have a choice about whether they are going to let Solomon's son be their king. They're going to make a judgment based on this answer. So this is kind of a very, very high stakes situation, right?
Mm-hmm. And Deanna?
Yeah.
It's subtle and in the background, but God's hand is in this. Yes. Because he, in the previous chapter, the prophet had told Jeroboam, you will have a kingdom, and it could last for many generations through your family. And kind of the same kind of promise that God made to Abraham, kinds of promises he made to Moses. We're getting that echo of that same thing again.
Yes, very good point.
And Jeroboam was not the one who said, oh, I'm going back home. The people called him back, which would be God's hand directing the people.
Yeah, and the people for themselves saying, like, we're not living under this situation of taxation and slavery anymore, right? So yeah, I mentioned last week, and the passage that talks about how Solomon did his forced labor, and I thought you all might want to hear it. It's interesting. This is from 1 Kings 5:13 through 16. Now, King Solomon levied forced laborers from all Israel, and the forced laborers numbered 30,000 men. He sent them to Lebanon, 10,000 a month in relays. They were there in Lebanon a month and 2 months at home. Remember, I was telling you they did kind of a month on, 2 months off situation. And Adoniram was over the forced laborers. Okay, we're going to see Adoniram in today's reading. Now Solomon had 70,000 transporters and 80,000 hewers of stones in the mountains. Okay, so it's not just the 30,000, right? It's growing, isn't it? 30,000 is just the ones he sent on this. So somehow he's pulling in a ton of people, and some of these would be foreigners, right? Because he has a deal with a neighboring country to work with them. In the mountains, besides Solomon's 3,300 chief deputies, he's got, you have this big a labor force. It takes a lot of management, doesn't it? Who were over the project and who ruled over the people doing the work. So we get an echo of their like overseers from Egypt, to this idea that like there's these layers of control over the people, right? Questions or comments on that before we go to the next section?
I maybe, oh, go ahead, Pam.
What was the numbers if you take the 10 tribes together and then the 2 tribes together? What was the difference in numbers between those two?
I don't know. I know that in some counts, Benjamin just gets swallowed up in Judah, but I think we can safely say that the 10 is by far the majority, right? But I don't actually know the numbers or the percentages of those. What were you going to say, Lula?
I'm afraid that I judge Jeroboam more harshly. If you desire to be a political leader, and particularly if you desire to overthrow the person who is, the first thing you do is stir up unrest. You are dropping hints here and there of how downtrodden your fellow people are. They start questioning orders that they are receiving. Well, yes, why should we be treated like this? Why should we have to work all this hard? And you have then a divided country. Then he just stirs it up a little bit more. And first thing you know, the people are ready to fight. And they say, who can we get for our leader? Oh, yes, let's get Jeroboam, and so they call for him. It wasn't that he was a reluctant person standing back in the shadows and the people said, let's find somebody. Oh, let's get this guy right here. I think it was all a plot by Jeroboam.
Okay.
I think he was a better politician. He really wrestled to get that kingdom away because he knew he was going to be head honcho. Because look what he did after he got it,
Right. I think that's a great alternate perspective on there. I think there's some really good points in there. Number one, that Jeroboam was supposedly anointed while the two of them were alone in the field, and yet enough people find out about it that Solomon knows, and Jeroboam has to flee to Egypt. And so I think you have a really plausible idea of how that news may have traveled away from Jeroboam out to the point that it got to Solomon.
Yeah, and you can even look at modern history, a little bit more modern, of people who have been put in prison and have come out to stir up all kinds of difficulties for whoever.
Yeah. Although we have to say there must have been a contingent of people in Israel who were working to the same ends, because
they want to ride in on his power. Right when he gets to be powerful, I'll be second in command, or third or fourth or whatever. Yeah. I just think there was a lot more plotting going on than just we heard he was anointed, so let's go ahead and get this guy. I think it was a big plot from the very get-go.
And there are always more details. Like when we think about these biblical stories, we get such a little slice of what's happening. Wouldn't we love to hear all of the details and hear the tone of all of that? It would be so fascinating to know that. And yet that's, we don't have all that information. And I think it's valuable to try and imagine it, and you can imagine it more than one way. And yet somehow, Jeroboam, whether he was reluctant or not, he does end up the leader. So it is a great point. And we also remember, as Linda said, God's hand is in this, right? This is not just an uprising that is from selfish ambition. It is from the Lord, right? And the Lord is saying, like, God may not stand for this enslavement of his people either, right? Okay, let's read the next.
God kind of uses, God uses, he uses all kinds of methods to accomplish his ends. And his end is to get a people ready for Jesus Christ to come. And this is how he gets rid of you know, the monarchy and all the other stuff that takes place. That's his end. That's what he's going to do. And he will use whatever he can, whatever he is there. It's amazing to me that God will use the greed of people to accomplish his ends. And just look at Pharaoh. Pharaoh thinking he was head honcho when he really wasn't. He could make a order and the whole army go after these slaves, but look what happened. And even when you look at how we got our Bible, when you read about that, you find out it was the greed of men. Somebody wanted to make money printing a Bible, and so he did. And he did make money. But look, we've got the Bible, you know. It was just a tiny little chink in the whole chain. And he uses,
right, and it doesn't necessarily imply God's approval of someone for God to use.
Yeah, he's not approving it. He just says, this is the way you are, and I'll show you, you know, who's boss.
And yet we know that God approved of Jeroboam enough to say, be faithful to me. He gave Jeroboam the choice, and we're going to see next week what Jeroboam does with the choice. But he gave Jeroboam the choice to be faithful and have God continue his line and make a dynasty for him. And so Jeroboam still at this point is I think he is truly in the realm of, he has the ability to be faithful to God. Now, what he does, that's a story for next week. So let's read chapter 12, 6 through 15.
Then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who had served his father Solomon during his lifetime. How would you advise me to answer these people? He asked. They replied, if today you will be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servants. But Rehoboam rejected the advice of the elders gave him and consulted the young men who had grown up with him and were serving him. He asked them, what is your advice? How shall we answer these people who say to me, lighten the yoke your father put on us? The young men who had grown up with him replied, these people have said to you, your father put a heavy yoke on us, but make our yoke lighter. Now tell them, my little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid on you a heavy yoke. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips, and I will scourge you with scorpions. 3 days later, Jeroboam and all the people returned to Rehoboam as the king had said, come back to me in 3 days. The king answered the people harshly, rejecting the advice given him by the elders. He followed the advice of the young men and said, my father made your yoke heavy. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions. So the king did not listen to the people, for this turn of events was from the Lord, to fulfill the word the Lord had spoken to Jeroboam, son of Nebat, through Ahijah the Shilonite.
Thank you. Okay, so what strikes you about this section?
He listened to the wrong people.
Okay. Sandy, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say he didn't take the advice of the wiser people. He chose the young people of his age.
Okay. What do we think about the elders? How did they get to be elders?
By being a little bit wiser, probably.
Yeah. Who were they the advisors for?
Solomon.
Yeah, they were Solomon's advisors. And so we have a sense that there may have been some wisdom in that community over the years of their advising and serving Solomon. And so they get this answer, say, to answer the people favorably. Why do you suppose these young men that Rehoboam turns to tell Rehoboam what they tell him?
It's almost a sense of power, kind of a power struggle, maybe.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Anne?
Well, I was just thinking maybe it's what he wanted to hear.
Okay. So the elders have their position stable, right? They've been Solomon's advisors for years. No one can take that status of existing elder advisor away from them. Like they could take them out of their position, but they've been there for years. They are established. These young men, they're up and coming, right? They want to get a role in the kingships, in the bureaucracy. Sweet job, right? Good work if you can get it. And so do they figure out what Rehoboam wants to hear and supply it? Right? They're the cadre of yes men coming up, and they are dependent on Rehoboam's favor to get their position. And so they may be telling him what he wants to hear. Great point.
And they knew his character, you know, if they were close enough to him to be appointed.
Okay, so we have this real sense, think about character, we have this real sense of a pride of youth, right? They want to be tough guys. We get a clue on their mentality if we look at the literal version of what they tell him to say. It's, my little one is thicker than my father's loins, literally. So there's a little bit of like equating power and sexual prowess implied there. I know it says finger in your translation. The word finger isn't in there. It's my little one. And so you're getting kind of a sense of this tough guy, kind of pride of youth coming through. And that may have been Rehoboam's character. And they may have all had that same sort of outlook. And it's coming through in their answer. So why does Rehoboam want to give, you know, assuming they tell him what he wants to hear or that it fits with his character, why does Rehoboam want to give the harsh answer? Why does he choose that way?
It shows a strong sense of power. I'm going to make these decisions and tough. If you don't like it, I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm going to do it.
As Mary said kind of at the beginning, it's not exactly an ultimatum, but it's a condition, right? And he may not have wanted to start his kingship from a position of weakness. He doesn't want to start by caving to this condition on his kingship. I'm the king. You don't get to tell me if I get to be the king. I tell you what to do. You don't tell me what to do. So there is a real power play going on here, isn't there? What else? What else may have had in mind?
I just have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm wondering, I mean, I have a footnote here that I haven't finished reading, but in verse 15, so the king did not listen to the people, for this turn of events was from the Lord to fulfill the Lord's, to fulfill where I lost my train of thought. But anyway, to fulfill the word the Lord had spoken to Jeroboam.
Yeah.
So this was really just playing out what God really intended to happen.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. You know, we have here, and remember, what does this remind us of in the Pharaoh story? What's the echo?
Pharaoh was unrelenting.
Right? He kept hardening his heart, and eventually God hardens his heart, right? Pharaoh's heart became hard and he would not listen to them, just as the Lord had said. And then later it says God hardened Pharaoh's heart. So we're getting an echo of that Pharaoh story. Rehoboam in the role of Pharaoh, and just like Pharaoh, Rehoboam makes his actual decision, but it's also the work of the Lord, right? And I think that we're seeing this same tension that we see all the way through scripture, right? Where when God allows us free choice, we don't make the choices that God would make for us, and he lets us, right? Like God would have rather, we know from all of the things that God has told David that he would much rather David's line be faithful to him and walk in his ways and love him, and he will bless them. That is what God says he wants. And yet we see the character of Rehoboam is coming out, and it's the opposite of the character God would want from his king, right? What is God wants his king to be a servant to the people, right? And Rehoboam refuses to be a servant to the people. And so this turn of events was from the Lord. This is the idea that when God gives us a choice, he lets us make it. And when we make it, he uses those choices to bring about his will, even through those choices that are the opposite of what he would want for us. We also see that, look at this idea of servant. Rehoboam seems to have grand plans, right? Why does he need to double the load? He wants to do stuff. What did Solomon do with his taxation and his forced labor?
He built a lot of buildings and expanded his territory, and his herds and everything was bigger, better, and more.
Bigger, better, more, right? Rehoboam, he's got plans. He wants to do bigger, better, more. He wants to have the kind of legacy that Solomon has. He wants people coming him from afar saying, you're the wisest, you're the best. Here's a bunch of gifts of apes, and people brought Solomon all the gold and the exotic animals, and he wants the bigger, better, more. Look at the key word that is in the answer of the elders in contrast to that bigger, better, more, right? So they say, verse 7, if today you will be look at the number of times, servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servants. It's just over and over again, this idea of be a servant king. Right? What a contrast. Thoughts on that?
Well, I have one thought, that we shouldn't be surprised after Solomon's life and all of the different wives from all of the different, and all of the different idols, that they worship, that his son wouldn't be, a godly man, let's just say. He's just kind of.
Yeah, the training that he received and the example that he saw was the bigger, better, more, right? Mm-hmm. And so the fact that that is carried out in his character is something that is not surprising to us. What has happened to wisdom? Mm-hmm. Right? Solomon's wisdom has been reversed by this concern for power, right? So that it has absolutely come about as we saw, beginning in Solomon, and then it's borne out in his son in this answer. Let's read 16 through 20, please.
When all Israel saw that the king refused to listen to them, they answered the king, "What share do we have in David? What part in Jesse's son? To your tents, Israel. Look after your own house, David." So the Israelites went home. But as for the Israelites who were living in the town of Judah, Rehoboam still ruled over them. King Rehoboam sent out Adoniram, who was in charge of forced labor, but all Israel stoned him to death. King Rehoboam, however, managed to get into his chariot and escape to Jerusalem. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. When all the Israelites heard that Jeroboam had returned, they sent and called him to the assembly and made him king over all Israel. Only the tribe of Judah remained loyal to the house of David.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so there is an echo of an earlier event here in this little song that they sing in their poem, their poetic response here. Back when David was king, after the unsuccessful revolt of his son Absalom, there's another mini revolt by another guy who's a Benjamite. Okay, Benjamite implies he might be trying to reclaim the kingship for Saul's descendants, since Saul was a Benjamite. But also, it says later he was someone from Ephraim. So he's kind of this, it's this idea of these 10 tribes, right? If we go back through the time approaching David's reign and through David's reign, we will see that this fracture line is present over and over again. Listen to 2 Samuel 21 through 12. Now, a worthless fellow happened to be there whose name was Sheba, the son of Bichri, a Benjamite, and he blew the trumpet and said, "We have no portion in David, nor do we have inheritance in the son of Jesse. Every man to his tent, O Israel." So all the men of Israel withdrew from following David and followed Sheba, the son of Bichri, and the men of Judah remained steadfast to their king. But the men of Judah remained steadfast to their king, meaning David, from the Jordan even to Jerusalem. Okay, so why use these same words again? Why do they echo their little poem?
Is it kind of a call to rebellion?
I think it's a call back to that consistent tension towards rebellion. So yes, I think you've got it. There's been this ongoing tension between the bulk of the country and the house of Judah over these generations, right? You may remember that when David was first made king, he was made king by Judah first and reigned a couple of years, and then by the rest of Israel. And so there are these repeated scenes that show there was always this deep fracture line. And I think what we're seeing here is that only God's sustaining presence with Israel was holding them together, right? There was always this crack between them. And whenever God is not holding it together, it comes apart, right? The unity that they have as a people is just, it's so dependent on God from their human standpoint and their human ability. Unity is beyond their grasp. And what happens is, as soon as God, because of his, the consequences, as he has promised, withdraws that unifying presence from them, we see the same fracture that we've seen over and over. Here it erupts again and they're splitting apart, right? I think we're seeing here that it's the sustaining presence of God that had ever kept them together. Thoughts on that?
I always assume that Judah and Israel, those names and terms always happened after this division of kingdoms. But you're saying that really there was these two ideas of Judah and Israel started before this? So what started this division long ago, or when did it start?
Right. I think that's very interesting and surprising, isn't it? But if you go back, like Judah makes David king in Hebron and he reigns there for, I can't remember how many years. And then all of Israel makes him king and he reigns over all Israel. And then he goes and captures Jerusalem and makes it his capital. And, so yes, these divisions have been there all along. And I think it may be, that maybe that the whole community had trouble accepting a Judahite just taking over, and that Judah is following David just because he is a Judahite and it's his tribe, right? And so we get this tribal loyalties. Why too, Benjamin was completely enclosed in Judah, I don't think they would have physically been able to align with the other because of the way that their territory was divided. So I think that's a geographical sort of outworking. Why the 10? It may just be everyone that's left. It also may be, we could go back and read the whole blessing that Jacob puts on his sons. Remember, so Jacob and the 12 sons, right? They sell off Joseph, he goes to Egypt, the whole family goes to Egypt. At the end of Jacob's life in Egypt, where he has gone with his sons, he starts giving blessings to each one of them. And the blessings for the first couple don't really sound very blessed. Reuben is the oldest, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah. He has like reasons. He's like, and you don't get my blessing because you did such and such, and you don't get my blessing because you did such and such, and you don't get my, and it comes down to Judah before you really see a true blessing. And so that thread of Judah, even though he's fourth born, as where we're going to see the monarchy, like permanent dynasty of a monarchy emerge, and where we're going to get the line of David and the line of Jesus, right? It's all pointing to Jesus. Lula pointed that out so well. And so, we could trace all of that through. This has been an ongoing generation after generation theme that is happening through the scriptures. So in the aftermath, other comments?
Do you recall the names of Moses' two sons that he had when he was in, what was it, Midian or whatever, being a shepherd anyway?
Yeah.
And I wondered if they are considered, were they considered part of that tribe, or were they?
I don't remember that. That's not coming back to me. I'm sure I have known it at one point, but no, I'm not remembering it right now. So that would be a great thing if somebody wanted to research.
I would look it up, but with two pairs of glasses trying to see in the dark, I don't do very well.
Right.
But I was just wondering if they played any role in any of this, or whether
that
they
would
were
be
just
really
forgotten
interesting.
or whatever.
Yeah. I may look it up. I don't know. We'll see what happens with next week's lesson, because we've got a lot to cover. Next week's pretty long, but if I look it up, I'll let you know.
Okay, thanks.
So in the aftermath of their answer, how does Rehoboam accept what, they say back to him? Well, then we're gone, right? To your tent, so Israel, right? And how does Rehoboam react to that? Does he accept that? Verse 18.
Well, he sent out his first in command, and they stoned him to death, and Rehoboam had to escape in a chariot.
Yeah, so Rehoboam thinks that the best thing to do will be to send out his heavy, right? This is the guy, Adoniram. When we read that passage over about the forced labor, Adoniram is the head of forced labor. So he is the enforcer. He's the heavy, right? And Adoniram, like, what kind of stuff might he have done, right? He probably has an enforcement force with him. It's probably not just him. He might have made some examples. He might have, kind of called on, remember we read that there was all this layer of middle management, right? He's got 3,300 of just, sub-managers, right? That are also enforcers over the people. So he may have tried to get those people to help him, or he may have tried to round up the rebellion leaders. But whatever he was trying to do, he's obviously numerically an inferior force. He's relying on his role as king's bully to get this done, right? And it doesn't work, does it? The people have the numbers. right? And as is always the case when, when the numbers decide to rise up, then the bully enforcer tactic, that scheme does not work. And so they stone him, right? And then what is Rehoboam's departure like?
As quickly as he could.
Yeah, he's running for his life, right? He manages to get in his chariot is one translation, or he makes haste to mount his chariot to flee, right? He's only now, like, he sends out Adoniram. I don't think he recognized the extent of his situation at that point. And it's not until now where he's making haste or managing to get in his chariot that he's recognizing, like, my life is actually in danger here. He barely gets out. If he had been wise in the first place, he might have brought everyone to Jerusalem where he had the upper hand. I think we're seeing a little bit of arrogance in his position that he was willing to go to Shechem to do this, where he is not in a position of power, and he flees to Jerusalem. And we see we're running really short on time, so I'm just going to have you look at this last section, 21 through 24. We see that when he arrives in Jerusalem, verse 21, what does he do?
He assembled all the house of Judah with the tribe of Benjamin.
To do what? Why are they assembled?
If he's calling in warriors, they're getting ready to fight.
Right. He's going to start a civil war to keep this part of the kingdom from seceding, right? To put it in kind of a modern military context. He's got the military might from the legacy of Solomon, and he's going to use it, right? This is an obvious move for a king. You don't just let your territory go, you recapture it, right? But what happens instead? Verse 22 and 23.
Prophet tells him not to go.
Yeah, such an echo of the Pharaoh story, right? After Pharaoh's heart was hardened, God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Well, here we have again this turn of events was from the Lord. Why do we get so many echoes of the Pharaoh story? Why are we seeing this repeated? What's the point that the author is making? You could write the same story with all the same factual events and not have those echoes in it.
But God is in charge. It's not the ruler.
Yeah. People make their choices and God lets them, or us, as it were, for good or for ill. We have our choices to make. And if we persist on making the wrong ones in the face of God's correction, he lets us. But he's still in control. And he uses those choices, even the bad ones, to work in history to accomplish his purposes. It's an amazing thing to realize that God is great enough to allow us our choices and work for his ends, right? What else? What else do you notice?
Well, the people still had enough fear of the Lord that they obeyed.
Yeah, great point. And, we see it's the people that we see God's compassion for coming out in this, right? God cares about abuse and oppression, no matter who is doing it. He doesn't let it go just because it's the good guys who are doing it. And so this event where Rehoboam's power is going to be greatly reduced is in compassion for his people. He wants his people taken care of, right? And yet he leaves. Rehoboam's power will be greatly reduced, but he will still have some kingdom. Why?
Promise to David, probably.
Yeah, God is so faithful, right? Like his leaving a tribe for Rehoboam is just an undeserved gift. Rehoboam doesn't deserve it, either in his faithfulness to God, nor in his wisdom, nor in his political savvy, right? He makes political errors, doesn't he? But God's grace says, no, I am going to leave a light burning, a flame for the house of David. And so God's grace continues for the house of David. Rehoboam has refused to be a servant king. He wants to lord it over his people and not serve them, and God is not pleased with that. But he is guiding the history of Israel, right? He's guiding towards the servant king, right? As we point forward towards Jesus Christ, we see he is the Son of Man who comes not to serve, but to be, or not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. That's in Mark 10:45, that idea that Jesus will be the outcome of the line of David, and his love will never end, and he will offer this covenant that each one can follow. Other thoughts or comments on today's lesson?
I don't know. I can't remember where this story goes, except, to point to Jesus, of course. But, the story of Moses and Pharaoh is a story of Jesus, of God freeing in their survival. And does this point to that as well, to their, to their freedom, or their being rescued by God?
And we don't see, it's a good question. We don't see any mention of forced labor for the people after this. So, we don't know, it doesn't say, and thus God dismantled all forced labor and none of the Israelites were ever, it doesn't say that. And yet, we don't get this idea of the forced labor. Again, now we will have war between Israel and Judah. We will have, this is, in some ways, this whole section that we're studying is bad news after bad news, right? Every lesson, there are bright spots of kings who are so faithful, but the story doesn't go well. It's a human story. And a lot of what we get here is that we still really need the ultimate freedom offered by Jesus Christ, right? And that will just happen over and over as we go through these kings, right? Boy, do we need Jesus, is an outcome throughout. Yeah.
Deanna.
Yes, Janelle.
I was thinking about the question, or the thought of it. What happened to Solomon's wisdom? I think God took it away. One thing I'm thinking about is the parable of the talents in the New Testament, about different people were given different talents. If they didn't use them, or didn't use them properly, they were taken away. So I'm kind of thinking that's what happened, that Solomon was not doing, using his talent as God wanted him to, so he took it away.
Yeah, and I think, even though the scripture doesn't say, and so God took Solomon's wisdom away, it doesn't say it that way, and yet we see obviously that his wisdom went unused, and we know that the unused gift atrophies, right? And so it may be that we can think about it as Solomon's wisdom was ignored and shoved to the side, put in last place for decision making. Instead, he continued to put in first place power, the love of wealth, the love of his legacy, right? And over we see that when we put our own legacy in opposition to God's will, we have the loss of the work of God and what he wants most for us. And so, all of this points to a caution. Constantly, this series we will always be kind of in the realm of a caution for our own thinking. Our wisdom has to be in submission to God. We have to be willing to be the servant to do the work well, right? We have to be willing to God uses a lot of people, but for us to be used by God in the way that he wants to use us, then our faithfulness and our dependence on him is part of what we need. So that's what we seek. Thank you guys for a wonderful lesson. Great discussion. I loved it. Thank you for your comments. And next week, we'll be doing the story of Jeroboam. So we'll see that kind of the other side. We saw a little bit of the Judah side, and next week we'll turn to the Israel side and see how all of this plays out. Thank you.
I got
Great
one more quote. I'll hurry through it. I read this 100 years ago. A question, are we doomed to always choose Barabbas? And I've thought of that for a long time, and I wonder about that. Are we doomed to always choose Barabbas? Those wrong decisions.
Thank you, Deanna. Great class.
Yes.
Thank you.
Judy has our.
I'll mention next week, I didn't say the reading. You should have it on your list, but it is 1 Kings 12:25 through 14:20. So it's a couple of chapters there. Go ahead.
Judy has our prayer today. Are there any prayer requests?
Okay, so I have wanted to show how to get to all the videos on YouTube because I think YouTube can be a little, well, for one thing, it's different if you're on your phone or you're on your computer. So what I'll start doing is on my computer, and I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, let me try and do this. Share screen. Okay, so if I just go to YouTube, I get sort of a home page. You can see right here that home is highlighted. And so this is YouTube showing me what it wants to show me. You know, YouTube's a commercial enterprise. I don't get to exactly control what it advertises to me, right? So at the top, there will almost always be an ad. And you can tell it's an ad. Look here, this little yellow square ad. Right. So every time I come and often when I do a search at the top, there will be some ads, and this is what they look like. They always have this little yellow square that tells you this is an ad. So it's showing me a bunch of stuff that I might be interested in. Some of it I am actually interested in. For example, I really like the Bible Project videos. You know, it's showing me one of the University Avenue videos. That's great. Minecraft videos on there because Sam has watched videos on my account, and so it thinks that I want to see Minecraft videos, even though, you know, I don't personally, but he does. So this isn't showing me the video I want today. And the way that I can find it, what I want, so if you can subscribe to certain channels. So like everyone who's producing videos has their own channel. So for example, University Avenue has a channel. If I click this symbol, this UA symbol, like notice that each one of these has their own little symbol. If I click this, okay, now I'm on the University Avenue channel. Now I can see all of the stuff that's been uploaded recently, and I can go from home to videos and see all the videos that they've done. I can scroll back down and see weeks and weeks ago, right? Well, say you haven't gone to my channel and it's not showing up there. The one way you can find it is a search. So my channel is just named Deanna Munger. You can put a space between this, or you can put no space between it. It won't matter. It will find me. And you're like, well, look right there, there's Deanna Munger. So if I click either my profile picture or my name here, what I'm doing is I'm going to the Deanna Munger channel. And you can see that I've arranged this. There's a bunch of videos that I have, but what I've done is I've put current studies at the top, and this box and this box are not individual videos, they are playlists. So what this is see how that little, I can't hover over it or else it goes away, but see how that says 1 with those lines? That's because that playlist just has 1 video in it because we've only done 1, right? We just have last week's in it. Once this video ends and I upload it, then Divided Kingdom over here will say 2 because there are now 2 videos, and so, and I'll just keep adding to them. You'll notice if we go down to the ends of the earth, there's all is like 12 videos. This was our Acts study from Tuesday. So lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3. This is all the videos from that playlist, and you can scroll through them and find them. If you just click here, it's play all. You may not want to see video 1 again. Maybe you saw video 1 and you want to see video 2. So what you need to do is view full playlist. So right here, now I can see the full playlist. Once I've got all those videos in there, they'll all show up here. So then I can pick the one that I have missed, right? If I missed class and I want to see that.
Can they see us? Like, is this public?
It is public. This is something I've announced a few times, both in the email list and in class. I have it small. I have it so that everybody's box is pretty small. If you don't want to be visible, you leave your camera off and it will not put your box on the video recording. Now, I don't want people to have to leave their camera off, but if it's just what is best for you. So the discussion gets recorded. Now, the thing is, look, no views. Not a lot of people are seeing these videos. That's okay. It's a convenience mostly for people who are in the class and who have missed one and they want to see it. Although I know it's not true that there are no views of this video. There are no views of the entire playlist at once, because if I go into video 1, there are actually a few views. And so this is what it looks like. It always wants you to upgrade. This upgrade, Stream Your Favorites Easy, is paid. So I do no thanks. And you see, we have the people whose videos are on there. Sandy shows up. Oh, this is me sharing my screen. If you were in the first lesson, you saw that I did that timeline. If you want to go forward, you can take this little red button here and drag it. If you want to go back, if you miss something, you can drag it back. It doesn't have a handy 30 seconds forward button, sadly. So people are visible. You remember there are some people whose videos are off. They are not visible, not even their name. So if you want to be completely anonymous, the way to do that is to leave your video off.
And
other questions?
Is this listed or unlisted? I guess if it's public, it's listed.
It's public, so it's listed, right? There are 3 privacy settings in YouTube. One is completely private and only I can see it. One is unlisted, and that means that you have to have the link to get to it. And the third is public, and that means it's searchable. And I have made these searchable. So they are public. And if anyone has concerns about that, you're welcome to talk to me. It was too hard for people to find them when they were unlisted. And so I kind of talked to the class and switched them to public. And then the option would be to leave your camera off if you don't want to be visible. Other thoughts, questions? Any logistics questions here? The way to subscribe to my channel, you can go down here. If you, it knows this is my channel. That's why I'm getting this analytics. So I want to show you a different one. If I go back to the home page and I go to, oh, see, it switched what it showed me, right? Let me try and get, how do I get rid of that? I don't know how to get rid of that while I'm on this other thing. If I go to say the Bible Project, I can hit the subscribe button. It's right here. I'm already subscribed, but I can subscribe to that. And you would think that if you want to see the channels you're subscribed to, that you would go right here to subscriptions. Well, you can do that, but it shows you just a selection from all the things you're subscribed to. So if you want to see a specific channel, the easiest way to do this is go to this little, these 3 lines always mean menu, right? So if I do those 3 lines, now subscriptions, it shows me all the things I'm subscribed to. So now, oh, there's University Avenue. Now I can go to that. Or, you know, if you want to see something else, I have a lot of art things I'm subscribed to. So, you know, I can scroll all the way through them and find exactly the one that I want and make sure I'm subscribed to that. Other questions?
I have a question. What is the name? What is the name of that program that Laura Kate was using it? I think they used it sometime in the high school class too, where the guy is drawing. It's like a book of the Bible, and he's drawing all of these things in it while he's talking really fast. What's that?
That is actually the Bible Project.
That is the Bible Project. Okay.
It is the Bible Project. They have their own website, so you can go to BibleProject.com and find that. These are their videos on YouTube. They're not just dependent on YouTube, but you can see that. So like I'm on their side, I scroll down, what is the Bible? Lately, they've been doing more thematic videos, but
yeah.
For example, like, and some of them are in series, like these are all on wisdom literature. This is a series on Torah, you know, and so you're seeing that if you search, like, say you wanted to see the Bible Project video on Mark, the best way to do that is Bible Project Mark. Okay, now this is the one that you were talking about where they're drawing. These ones have art. They're produced by the same people. They are very good, but these are the overviews that tell you the themes and the structure of the book. And there's one for every book of the Bible. So you could go in there and watch these at your leisure.
Thank you. That was what I was wanting to do. I think that's really fascinating.
They're very good, theologically, extremely sound. They do stay away from some more controversial topics, but I have found the theology in this particular group to be extremely solid, really, really good. They offer graduate level classes for free on their website. They have a classroom. You can go in and take a class. I can show that next if anyone's interested. It's very good.
Thank you.
Other questions on YouTube before we leave YouTube? It's just a little bit different on your phone is kind of the downside. When you, let me see if I can do a share of my phone. I didn't set that up, so I may not be able to. Let's see. Plug in. It's thinking. Other questions while it's thinking? Okay. Okay, this is my phone screen. So on my phone, you know, this is kind of a home. You get there by pushing the home button, or if you have a newest phone, and obviously this is Apple. I don't have an Android to demonstrate, although it is fairly similar. So I have the YouTube app, which is really the easiest way to watch YouTube videos. So if I touch the YouTube app, I'm in here, and once again, oh, it won't let me show. I guess they have it blocked. Oh no, here it is. Okay, so once again, you can see I have that ad at the top. So the first thing it showed me when I went in was the ad, and then I don't know why it keeps doing that. And then it's just showing me some videos that it thinks I may want to find. So if I want to see my subscriptions, I can go to this button at the bottom. Nope. Doesn't like it. Okay. It doesn't want to talk. Oh, see right there, subscriptions, right there. That is, and then, this is frustrating. You saw very briefly across the top are some of my subscriptions. So I would then click on University Avenue, click on the Bible Project, click on Deanna Munger to find my church videos. And sorry, it's not showing it. Oh, there it is. Oh, see across the top? Yes. University Avenue, Bible Project. Those other ones you're seeing are all my art stuff. So I can click there and easily get to the things I'm subscribed to. And I can always search as well, which is that the very top, there is a, there's a little magnifying glass, and that's the place to search. So. Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna say bye to everyone.
Hey, Deanna.
Oh, yeah?
This isn't about the Bible class, but is Julie on YouTube? Your sister?
She is. Yeah. Ridgelight Ranch is her.
I saw, I think I get an email or something. Somehow I see that, or maybe it was Instagram, something.
She's on all of them.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, my sister has a business doing, I guess, art curriculum and instruction. It's art education is what it is. Mm-hmm. And so like a lot of her videos will be things like how to draw or things she's been making, or, you know, it's art stuff, art and homeschool and education.
I tried to get her book when she offered it free, but for whatever reason, I wasn't able to get that. But I thought, well, I could just, you know, search her out because I would like to do some things with Penelope. And I thought that would be a good thing for me, because Penelope loves all kinds of crafts and I'm always trying to find stuff for her to do. So.
Yeah, she's really, so she offers lesson plans, and if you're only using them for one person, you pay less than if you're using them for a large group of people. Mm-hmm. So it, like on, and that's at just, I think ridgelightranch.com.
Okay.
But they're set up to do like a progression where you have instruction and practice before that forms a basis for creative play. And so it really does move. And she has a great artist series where you learn about historical artists, and it's neat.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.